Clerk, please withdraw floor amendment number 1. Any further amendments?
Floor Amendment Number 2 offered by Representative Gable.
Representative Gable on floor amendment number 2.
Thank you. Floor Amendment 2 is a new bill. It is the Medical Aid in Dying bill, and I will speak to it on third reading.
Leader Gable moves for the adoption of floor amendment number 2 to Senate Bill 1950. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments, Mr. Clerk?
No further amendments, but a correctional note has been requested by the sponsor and has not been filed.
Leader Gable moves to withdraw the corrections note. The corrections note is withdrawn. Any further notes?
Nothing further.
Third reading. Please read the bill, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Bill 1950, a bill for an act concerning health. Third reading of the Senate bill.
Leader Gable on Senate Bill 1950.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Medical aid in dying is a trusted and time-tested medical practice that is part of the full spectrum of end-of-life care options, including hospice and palliative care. Deb's Law would allow terminally ill, mentally capable adults with a prognosis of just 6 months or less to live to request from their doctor a prescription for medication that they can then decide to self-ingest to die peacefully in their sleep. Medical aid in dying is authorized in 12 jurisdictions: Oregon, Washington, Montana, Maine, New Jersey, Vermont, New Mexico, Colorado, California, Hawaii, Washington, D.C., and now includes Delaware. Beyond authorizing medical aid in dying for a terminally ill adult who is an Illinois resident and has a 6-month prognosis, as confirmed by 2 Illinois physicians, Deb's Law also requires the following steps. Qualified individuals must be able to self-administer, i.e. self-ingest, the medicine. Physicians must inform the requesting individual about all of their end-of-life care options, including comfort care, hospice, palliative care, and pain control. No physician, healthcare provider, or pharmacist is required to participate in the law. The individual can withdraw their request for medication or change their mind after receiving the medication and decide not to take it. An individual's providers may refer the person for a mental health evaluation to ensure the person's capacity to make an informed decision. The law includes multiple protections to prevent coercion, including strict eligibility requirements, 2 separate physician assessments, and mandatory counseling on all treatment options. The law makes it a felony to coerce someone to request the medication or to forge a request. Life insurance payments cannot be denied to the families of those who use the law. Healthcare providers who participate and comply with all aspects of the law are given civil and criminal immunity. Healthcare providers must submit documentation of medical aid in dying deaths to the state health department so it can compile an annual report for lawmakers and the public. Death certificates list the terminal disease as the cause of death, consistent with statutory language to provide accurate data and to prevent inappropriate suicide investigations. The law includes several other regulatory requirements: 2 verbal requests for the medication directly from the patient, with a 5-day waiting period between the first and second request. A written request is also required from the individual requesting medical aid in dying. Prescribing physicians must comply with medical record documentation requirements, and unused medication must be disposed of according to state and federal law. In a February 2023 poll of 700 likely Illinois voters conducted by Impact Research, more than 7 out of 10 Illinois voters, 71%, including 73% of voters living with a disability, think a mentally capable adult patient with an incurable terminal illness who only has 6 months or less to live should have the legal option of medical aid in dying to pass peacefully in their sleep. Less than 1 out of 5 voters, only 17%, oppose the legal option of medical aid in dying. Majority support for medical aid in dying spans the age, gender, racial, and religious spectrum. White voters, 69%. Black African American voters, 69%. Hispanic Latino voters, 86%. Catholics, 69%. Non-Catholics, Christians, 58%. And atheists, agnostics, non-affiliated, 89%. In a February 2011 Medscape WebMD poll, nearly 7 out of 10 Illinois physicians, 58%, said they support medical aid in dying, a practice in which a terminally ill adult with decision-making capacity asks for and receives a prescription medication that may be self-ingested to hasten a foreseeable death. Only 1 out of 4 Illinois physicians, 25%, oppose medical aid in dying. There are also many safeguards in this law. She's okay? Okay. So Deb's law, like all medical aid in dying laws in the U.S., contained core safeguards to protect patients from abuse and coercion under the law. Patients, not doctors, nurses, or healthcare proxies, must initiate a request for medical aid in dying. The patient must make 2 oral and 1 written requests for medication. The patient must have a terminal diagnosis with a 6-month prognosis and must be able of making medical decisions for themselves. The patient's diagnosis, prognosis, and decision-making capacity are evaluated by 2 physicians. If there's any question of a doubt of that person's mental state, they must be referred for an evaluation by a mental health specialist. No person qualifies for medical aid in dying solely because of disability or age. The patient must ingest the medication themselves via the GI tract by swallowing, feeding tube, or a rectal catheter. The medication may not be injected into a vein or administered by IV, and it may not be administered to the patient by a third party. There are criminal penalties for any person who coerces or induces a patient into accessing MAID. She's okay. In the 28 years since Oregon's law went into effect, 28 years this law has been in effect, there has never been a single verified case of abuse or coercion under the law. Nobody has ever been charged criminally for violating the law. No medical professional has ever faced disciplinary action, and medical aid in dying is time-tested and the safeguards work. Opponents of MAID will sometimes cite cases from Canada, Europe, or other countries to justify their criticism. We are not Canada. MAID laws in the U.S. operate with a distinct legal environment and differ sharply from other countries in how patients qualify for and request the medications. It is impossible to compare what is happening in Canada with the bill in Illinois. The medication most commonly used across the country is a compound mixture called DDMA-PH containing Valium, digoxin, morphine, amitriptyline, and phenobarbital. The medication typically causes patients to fall asleep within 2 minutes to 2 hours, and death occurs within 30 minutes to 8 hours. Across the authorized jurisdiction that report data, 10,211 individuals to date have chosen to use medical aid in dying. Less than 1% of the people who die in each jurisdiction use the law each year. Only 62% of the people with prescriptions actually ingest the medication. Up to 38% of the people who go through the process and who die without using the medication die from from other reasons. What I hear from many people is that people who are terminally ill, they derive a great peace of mind simply knowing that they have the option if their suffering becomes too great. The majority of terminally ill people who utilize medical aid in dying are enrolled in hospice or palliative care services at the time of their deaths. So this is just one of the medications available to people who are terminally ill and dying. I would appreciate an aye vote.
We are instituting unlimited debate with a 3-minute time limit. On this question, Representative Meyer.
As we started hearing of this bill moving over the last couple months, I've had many, many phone calls and emails. And it's because of the way the state of Illinois does things. And they don't do things very well. We have many families here with disabilities and with their loved ones. And when you try to get services in the state of Illinois, you are told if you want your loved one to have services, you have to give up guardianship. So DHS sends them to the Illinois service coordinators so they can give up guardianship of their loved ones to get them services. Now, we've watched these services. I've seen these services in action, and I've seen the residents that have been moved into Murray on hospice to die. And I can go there now and watch them in the swimming pool swimming. I can watch Marjorie driving her bicycle around. She was brought there to die because of the services and the way they're set up in the state. So who, when you're a guardian of the state because your family wanted to get you services to help take care of you, who's going to make that judgment if you're going to be put on hospice and given this? It terrifies. Groups from national organizations down have contacted me wanting to know about the state guardianship over their loved ones. Who's making that decision if they're better off dead or alive? Can you tell me that? I do have a limited time here.
Yes, sponsor yields. Leader Gable.
Thank you. This is, for medical aid in dying, a person would have to ask them for it themselves. Nobody is allowed to ask for it for them. They have to ask for it themselves. They have to go to 2 physicians. They have to be able to ingest it themselves. It's a decision that they make themselves. Nobody can make that decision for them.
Is a state guardian going to go in and because they're nonverbal and say, well, you're not saying no.
If
You're
they are not
saying
verbal,
yes.
they are not allowed to get this.
And if they are verbal and they're not sure what's going on?
The doctors have to be mentally capable.
Are these the same doctors that come in as they did a month and a half ago and change a chart from being a 9-year-old mentality to an 18-month-year-old so that they can be released from state care?
That's a rhetorical question. I don't know.
It's a true question, though. Who is there to protect them in this bill?
Representative Myers, please bring your remarks to a close. I'll give you extra time since I didn't hear you initially. I apologize.
This bill terrifies the families of our most vulnerable. Many of them have done what the state asked them to, so they knew their loved one would get care services. This bill terrifies them. They're happy to see their loved ones splashing around in the pool or riding a bike now. Even though they were on hospice, they would have qualified for this. They were never given the opportunity in the setting the state had them. They would be dead now, and they're not. Please vote no.
They would not be considered qualified.
On this question, Leader West, 3 minutes.
Thank you to Mr. Speaker. To the bill. Live every day like it's your last day because it just could be. A statement I heard in church from the seasoned members while growing up, and it puts things in perspective on what's important to me. My faith, my family, and this job in that order. My baby girl's about to be 5, and she's the apple of my eye. When she was 2, I found myself in the hospital in excruciating pain. Pain that I wish on no one, even those who treat me as if I'm their enemy. Once I came out the hospital, I learned that people go through that same pain that I went through on a daily basis. I'm thankful that my pain was temporary, not terminal, but it could have been. But in this stage of my life, I can only imagine. And I am so thankful to God that I can only imagine. But there are Illinoisans who currently, and unfortunately there'll be future Illinoisans, who can't imagine what it feels like to have a terminal diagnosis. I remember the moments of relief during my time of extreme agony. I felt relief when I passed out from the pain in the ER, which my wife told me happened after the fact, and I felt relief when I woke up when they cut me open and fixed the problem. There are people who only feel better when their body shuts down. This is daily, in perpetuity. I can only imagine. Even those of us who have loved ones who have received terminal diagnoses, you are closer to the experience, but you yet can only imagine as well. But what I can imagine is the mental turmoil of such a diagnosis. I needed to seek out therapy after my curable diagnosis. Depression, anxiety, the thoughts that went through my head were dark. A lot of us can imagine having dark thoughts. With those dark thoughts, this bill has many safeguards in place where I will not qualify for medical aid in dying. Many safeguards. To quote the bill, you must have a sound mind. Any doubt from a medical professional that you do not have a sound mind, then you do not qualify. Let the record reflect. I'm a public official who represents a great many of people with many religions, and I believe in the miraculous healing power of Jesus Christ. I truly believe that cancer is a killer, but God is a healer. I've personally witnessed Miss Nylene from my church receive a terminal diagnosis of 6 months in '98, and she lived until 2021. I've heard testimonies similar to that throughout my life. After my illness, I value life even the more. Life is sacred, but death is sacred too. The sanctity of life includes the sanctity of death. This bill allows, if one chooses by themselves, for someone with a terminal diagnosis to have a dignified death. A decision between the patient, their physician, and their God. It is not our decision as government officials to get in the way of that. At the end, each of us must work out our own soul salvation with due reverence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Weber.
To the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The bill.
So I don't feel old, but I'm definitely not a youngster. However, I am at an age that I have seen a lot of death. I no longer have grandparents. I've lost sisters, brothers, nephews, mom and dad. There's not many left that are older than me in my family. We all wish that there was no suffering, no pain, but watching those last moments of a loved one is never easy. I can understand both sides of this issue, but for many of us, like the previous speaker said, we do believe in miracles. We can all find instances of those who were not supposed to be with us for as long as they were, but I am thankful for that time that we had. Pain management has come a long way, advanced leaps and bounds, making those last months, weeks, days, and hours bearable. I can also remember times where that was not the case, and I wish I could erase those times. Every moment of life should be cherished, and this bill's sole purpose is to extinguish it. At the same time, we are turning those who have spent their careers saving life into life takers. I find it sad that Illinois wants to be the destination to end life. Thank you.
On this question, Representative Grassi.
To the bill, Mr. Speaker.
To the bill.
Thank you. I come here not only as a legislator, but as a longtime hospice chaplain who has had the sacred responsibility of walking with literally thousands of people through the final days of their lives and being at their bedside for their final breath. I believe deeply in the power of palliative and hospice care, so much so that I've dedicated my entire life to caring and supporting for dying and grieving people. I've seen hospice ease pain and suffering and offer dignity and quality of life as people are dying. But I've also seen the rare moments when even the best care cannot relieve suffering and pain. When patients ask us with clarity and peace for the ability to choose how their life ends. This bill is not about choosing death. It's about choosing how we want to live in the face of our dying. It only applies to mentally capable, terminally ill adults. And my hope is, after all other care options, such as hospice, have been exhausted, this bill is surrounded by safeguards, and the terminally ill patient is the one who is always in control. I know some people worry about where this could lead, and please know I understand those concerns and I hear those. But I ask all of us here to consider this. Not one of us can control whether or not we will die. Every single one of us will die. But we can offer people the comfort of controlling what matters most to them and to us as they are dying. This bill is about compassion. This bill is about autonomy. This bill is about love. Love for life and for those who are living their final chapter. And most of all, this bill is about trust. Trusting already dying people to make the most personal decision of all. So it is with deep understanding of this situation and deep compassion for those who are dying that I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Leader Spain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Get you yield.
Leader Gable, we had a discussion in committee about the fiscal note that I filed on this bill. You made a commitment to return and have an answer delivered on that fiscal note. Are you satisfied with the answer provided by the Department of Health Care and Family Services?
Leader Gable.
Yes.
Isn't it true that we agreed we would ask HFS to provide us a number on the current Medicaid spend for hospice care in the state of Illinois?
I just received this the other day. I did not ask them specifically. I just asked them for a fiscal note.
Mr. Speaker, to the bill. Ladies and gentlemen, I requested this fiscal note, and Leader Gable exercised her prerogative to file a series of other notes, which is fine. What I intended to uncover was an understanding of some of the costs associated with this topic for the state of Illinois. And unlike expected fiscal issues facing our state and other matters where there is a fiscal impact that is a large cost to the state of Illinois, I wanted to understand how the issue of costs should be considered on this very sensitive topic. Because one of the things we learned in committee, that the price of this prescription, fatal prescription, is a cost of $500 to $700 to end one's life. And I think it's important we understand, certainly not because we have this intention, but we need to think about what the impact of this type of action would be on payers, on the healthcare delivery system. A month of hospice care costs approximately $15,000. And we have to understand then what an impact of having a $500 to $700 end-of-life option could be in the wrong hands. It's important that we're sensitive to this very issue, and the spirit of the fiscal note that I filed certainly has not been met with a blow-off answer from HFS that didn't seek to provide the explanation that we had agreed to previously. You know, we have medical aid in dying already. It's called palliative care. It's called hospice care. This physician suicide bill is going to cause great harm throughout the state of Illinois, devaluing life, normalizing suicide, making it less likely that patients can engage in the type of breakthrough treatment and cures that I think have advanced our society and medicine so importantly. The bill is not ready to go. It does not have the type of strong protections against coercion that should be included in an initiative as important as this. I urge a no vote.
On this question, Representative Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill. Many of you have heard me use the phrase, nothing about us without us, as how I like to drive my legislative agenda. And so I want to share some of the words of the people who are most directly impacted by this. My name is Beth Langdon. I became disabled due to a traumatic injury at 17. The first thing I felt was a tremendous loss of control over my life. Much of what I have done and worked for since then has been to regain and retain that, medically, economically, and personally. It's why I embrace the most fundamental principle of the independent living movement and the disability rights and justice movement, that all of us, regardless of circumstance, have and deserve the right to self-determination, to make decisions and to exert control over our own lives, including about the services and the care we receive. That was 50 years ago, and as I've gotten older, the odds have gotten increasingly better that I will die of one of the terminal conditions that all of us may face, like heart disease or cancer. We as a culture don't deal particularly well with the only thing in life that's certain, our eventual death. I think that one of the most frightening things about death for most of us is that it means the ultimate loss of control. I want for myself, for those I love, for anyone else, the right to have some modicum of control in not just how I've chosen to live, but in how I approach my death if it is from a terminal illness. And this is about terminal illness, not acute or chronic illnesses or conditions that can be managed with treatment. Death elicits fear. I understand how all of this can elicit fear. And for many of us who've been marginalized by disability, age, poverty, race, and other socially imposed constructs, we also fear being devalued or dismissed by systems and professionals in those systems, including medical professionals when we face chronic or acute care situations. And this is just not what this bill is about. This is not about chronic or acute care. Disability is not terminal. Death, like life, is easier to navigate when you know you will have options to choose from, even if you never need to, or even if you choose not to. The ability to control the decision-making process in SB 1950 is detailed and robust. It's a very high bar to be eligible to participate. It requires you to be able to be fully in control of the decision-making process and of the administration of medication, only when you have a prognosis of less than 6 months or less to live. It requires consultation with at least 2 different medical professionals. It has very strong provisions that prevent anyone from assisting or exerting undue influence, including any person to whom you might have already given health care power of attorney. It is a trusted and time-tested medical practice that is part of the full spectrum of end-of-life care options, including hospice and palliative care. People move across the country to access it. For those with disabilities or marginalized by poverty or whose terminal illness prevents it, we need the equity that comes from being able to choose that option where we live. This bill doesn't lessen anyone's control or rob anyone of choice over our lives or at the point when our lives reach an inevitable, unavoidable end that no treatment can improve or reverse. This bill strengthens our control. As someone who has learned to never take any right to self-determination for granted,
please bring your remarks to a
2
close.
more sentences, I promise.
Okay.
I hope Illinois joins the many other states who extend this ability to the end of our lives so that all can choose a death that is peaceful, without unnecessary suffering, with less fear. And as someone whose son is named for someone who had to move to California to exercise this option, I urge a yes vote.
Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to the bill.
Bill.
If this bill ultimately passes, these supposed strict restrictions that we're talking about today will be continually expanded. They always are. It's happened in Oregon, it happened in Vermont, it's happened everywhere. Until they eventually melt away. Indeed, Stephanie Germani, one of the supporters of the French-assisted suicide bill, gave away the game. She said, "It's a foot in the door," which will be important for what comes next. That's always the strategy here. Get what you can today, and once we've established the principle that killing is an answer to human suffering, the expansion of eligibility will follow in due course. Charlie Meyer made a good point. And as one who is a caregiver for a disabled person, that rang true, because what we've got here are strict restrictions that will look really, really too strict when it comes time to say about a disabled person, whether that person is in your own home or in a SILA or someplace like that. It's just too difficult for this person to carry on. We're going to make that decision on behalf of that person. It's going to happen. One thing that I don't know that the bill entails is how long does one have to be an Illinois resident in order to avail himself or herself of this assisted suicide? I don't think that was answered. I haven't had a chance to look at the bill, but maybe it's in there. To conclude, our culture has become so nihilistic that the emerging right to death, eventually, and for any reason, is has greater emotional saliency than our steady eroding right to life.
On this question, Representative Costa Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of this bill, and while I think it's more important today for me to share the words of my own constituent who has been educating me on this issue, and her name is Deb Robertson. My name is Deb Robertson. Thank you for allowing me to share my story and make clear the critical need for this legislation that will provide terminal adult Illinoisans like myself a full range of end-of-life options, including medical aid in dying. I deserve to have this option available to me. I was diagnosed in January of 2022 with a very rare and aggressive terminal cancer called neuroendocrine carcinoma. I remember the call from my doctor telling me my liver was full of tumors. How could this be? I am in good shape, I eat healthy, and I'm very active. But after a biopsy and multiple scans, I was told there was no cure for this disease. I am going to die. Sharing the news with my wife, parents, children, and friends was brutal, but I have kept fighting. After several months of chemotherapy, it stopped working. I continued to try several more chemotherapies, but the disease kept growing. There are very few treatments for this cancer because it is so rare. I am in a clinical trial that has shown some progress and kept me stable for 7 months, but the reality is that this trial will stop working at some point. I know what this looks like. I join a regular Zoom call with people from across the globe who share my diagnosis. I have watched so many struggle in pain to the end of their lives until their last breath. Today, I know the end for me could be near. That is why I hope you will appreciate that I want to spend part of my remaining time doing everything I can to ensure that terminally ill Illinoisans have the full range end-of-life options to include medical aid in dying. Now, let me be clear. I love life. I don't want to die. I love my family. My wife and our children have supported me throughout my cancer journey and support me in pursuing this end-of-life option. They all live in Illinois. My parents, my wife, our adult children, grandkids, and siblings. Even my 16 and 18-year-old grandsons support me being here today. But I am going to die. And when the time comes, I pray that this committee and this body and your colleagues will allow me and others with terminal illness this option at the end of life. This legislation is truly about options. To be sure, I was not given an option about whether I got this terminal disease, but I deserve options about how and when I leave this earth. I deserve options to enjoy the time I have left with my loved ones and friends and not worry about how my death will occur. It is the last bit of control left to me, but I can only have those options.
Representative, please bring your remarks to a close.
If you vote for this bill, and that is why I'm spending a portion of the precious time remaining to me to ask this body to support the adoption of medical aid in dying in Illinois. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Howder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, today I stand before you as a physician to express my strong opposition to physician-assisted suicide. I really wish I was more eloquent for the thousands of Illinois physicians who deeply oppose physician-assisted suicide. First, this process is an insult to the seriousness of the topic. Illinois deserves better. When we debate this topic, 3 minutes, life, death, suicide, mental health, drug safety, coercion, insurance, medical ethics, right of consciousness, the Medical Practice Act, inequalities in care, all stuffed in a shell bill late Friday with little time for stakeholders to have input in the last few days at the end of session. This process is wrong. I object to this being called a sanitary food preparation bill. There are many reasons to oppose. There are many groups opposed. I'm going to try to speak for medicine. The very profession you intend to give this unrequested power to are opposed. And why? We already have medical aid in dying. Physicians and other healthcare professionals have devoted our lives taking care of these patients. We've already recognized the need for more concentrated focus on the dying process with pain control, death with dignity, comfort care, with the growing fields of palliative care and hospice care. We have true medical aid in dying. This is medical aid in death, which is to say physicians helping their patients commit suicide. Why is medicine opposed? Our oath. Physicians have been given by God and by the laws of men the primary responsibility to preserve life, to heal, to relieve suffering. Our ancient oath, which we take seriously, passed down from generation to generation of physicians, have always contained the phrase, first do no harm. Assisting a patient in killing themselves is fundamentally incompatible with this sacred duty and oath and changes forever the soul of medicine. Life has inherent value and inestimable worth. The disabled, the vulnerable, the terminally ill, those with mental health issues. Physician-assisted suicide subtly or not so subtly introduces the true a duty to die. Subtly, these patients feel like they are worth less. And I'm not even going to be able to talk about the insurance. We're giving insurance companies another tactic to pressure patients. The cheapest care is no care.
In closing, don't undermine the relationship physicians have with their patients. Don't give insurance companies another tactic, another tool to pressure patients, to pressure the disabled, the poor, the terminally ill, with no care, with death. I ask the members of this Illinois House, don't pass this bill. Vote no, or don't vote at all. It's the first time a physician will recommend you go out and take a smoke break. This is,
Please bring your remarks to a close.
thank you. This bill irrevocably changes the principles, the purposes, and the practice of medicine in Illinois. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On this question, Representative Guerrero Cuellar.
Thank you, Speaker. To the bill.
The bill.
I want to read the perspective from a parent when it comes to their child. My name is Nilsa Centino. I am the mother of Miguel Carrasquillo. Miguel was a chef in Chicago when he was diagnosed in 2012 with an aggressive, deadly brain tumor called glioblastoma multiforme. Despite bravely enduring excruciating, painful treatments to try to cure his cancer, it spread across his body. Miguelito was my only son. He was only 35 years old when he died from cancer on June 5th, 2016. Miguelito was an old soul with a contagious smile who stood out for his ability to advocate for change. Even while he was suffering from the brain tumor that spread all over his body, he spent his last days advocating for medical aid in dying among his beloved Latino community, for a compassionate option that tragically was denied to him. The emotional pain of losing my only son devours me every day. I will never forget the last time I caressed and kissed my son's beautiful yet tired face. He was in so much pain, and we spoke about God. Miguelito's voice was fragile. His words were mumbled, yet he reminded me to keep fighting for his legacy to authorize medical aid in dying. Miguel died minutes later without the end-of-life care option he fought for. Although my son's voice has gone silent, mine has not. Passing this compassionate legislation was Miguel's final wish, and it is now my life's work. I'm honored to say that the bill now contains Miguel's name, along with other powerful advocates for this compassionate option. I urge you as a mother, please honor my only son, Miguelito's memory by voting yes on the End of Life Option Act. I do want to add that I've been on both sides of this coin. I've seen this only from a daughter to a parent. And when you see someone for 6 months in excruciating pain with no option, it is the hardest thing that you have to live as a child, to see your parent suffer. And so it was the hardest decisions that we had to make medically, and what some of you members had talked about, hospice and palliative care, and we go through the options and we talk about it and the cost and the insurance and all those things. We do, but you're looking at a fragile person laying in bed, and you know what that person's asking you, and you want to do right by that person because you know they're suffering. This is not a way to see a loved one at all. This mother saw her son. I saw my father. And I carry his name, and I proudly do, but I would never want to see any parent. I can't see another parent go through something similar. And so I ask you to support this bill. Thank you.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Today we face a truly dangerous proposal, and that's assisted suicide. There's no way to sanitize this topic. My answer is simple and unwavering. Absolutely not. Life is a gift from God, not something for government to discard like they have the tens of millions of babies that have been slaughtered. Our doctors take an oath to heal, to save lives and not to end them. This isn't healthcare, this is a profound betrayal. Legalizing assisted suicide opens a Pandora's box. It tells our most vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled, those battling despair, that their lives are expendable. It invites pressure, it invites abuse, and a slippery slope to the culture of death. Instead of offering death, we must offer true dignity. Our focus must be on compassion, compassionate care that supports individuals, providing comfort and real hope and not just a needle. We must reject this policy. We must protect every life and stand for a society that values every person from conception to their natural end. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Stava Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
The bill.
I had a few stories from a constituent of mine, but many of us have already shared the stories of those who did not have access to medical aid in dying here in our state. So I'm not going to share those stories, but I do have a story from a constituent of mine who I was able to meet by Zoom as he lived in California. But his mother and father lived back in Illinois in my district, and that is actually where he had hoped to come back to die. And unfortunately, that was back in 2022, and we know it's now 2025, so this bill is not in time for him. But I think in his honor, I want to read his story from his mother's words. In August 2017, Susie, my father and I flew out to California from Illinois to visit Andrew. I knew Drew wasn't feeling well because every time we'd eat together, he'd have to go to the bathroom. I talked him into having some tests done the week after we left. His doctors couldn't even get through his colonoscopy because the tumor was so large. When he called to tell me the news, I just dropped to the floor devastated. Drew had been a cancer survivor at the age of 5, but this time things were different. I couldn't control everything like I had when he was little, when I managed all his doctor's appointments and so on. Now he was a 29-year-old adult doing all of that alone. The distance was so hard for us, and I was not able to retire at that time. So we did our best going back and forth between Illinois and California. But Andrew did end up spending a lot of time in the hospital on his own, which bothered me. The hospital is a scary place to be by yourself. Optimistic man that he was, Andrew assumed that like when he was a child, he would have radiation, chemo, some surgeries, and then go on about his life. He continued working as a special education teacher and told us that everything was going to be fine after the treatment. He underwent repeated treatment regimens, radiation, chemo, surgery, again and again. And this is for every single one of the people sitting across the aisle, somehow implying someone that would take this option is not trying for their life. That's extremely offensive, because what this person went through, what Andrew went through, was every step imaginable to keep himself alive. But Andrew continued to amaze us all with his positive attitude. I never heard him say, "Why me?" He just took the view that this was what he had been dealt in life, and he could either choose to become bitter or keep moving. Thankfully, he chose the latter. Andrew was eventually informed that he likely had 6 months or less to live. I asked him, "Why don't you come home to Illinois? You can live here in the basement. You'll have your own space." But Andrew was adamant that he wanted to stay in California because he needed the option of medical aid in dying. I did not argue with him. None of our family did. It
Representative,
was
please-
clear that
please
having
bring your
that
remarks to
option
a
gave
close.
Andrew great comfort. Andrew was determined to be in charge of his disease, and take charge he did. Becoming involved with Compassion and Choices, creating a podcast, Death with Dignity, and coming to terms with a terminal diagnosis. Andrew saw the gifts his cancer had brought him in the form of all the people he got to meet because of it. Even through a traumatic illness, he was guiding the people who loved him through that journey in a positive way so that we could grow up to accept his fate. In 2002, Andrew completed the process of requesting a prescription for aid in dying medication through California's End of Life Option Act. Although he wasn't yet ready to use it, he wanted the peace of mind that having the medicine in hand would give him.
Representative, please bring your remarks to a close. I know this is very emotional.
Andrew's quality of life was increasingly limited. He did not want to die. And he fought very hard to live as long as he could, but in the end, his day-to-day pain was increasing. His increased pain medications caused miserable side effects. And when he went to the bathroom, it was like a crime scene. One day, he just said, "I think I'm ready." As sunset approached on November 16th, 2022, Andrew took some time alone with each of us, his sisters, his roommates, his dad, and me. We all gathered around him. The general mood was lighthearted, with everyone commenting on the beauty of the skyline, sharing funny stories from Andrew's childhood, and Andrew getting us laughing in turn. It was a really positive moment. 2 nurses from hospice mixed up the medication and gave him a spoonful of raspberry sorbet to take it with. He was asleep within minutes. Soon he started snoring, which was music to my ears since he had not slept well for so long. The rest of us sat there listening to the soundtrack he had put together. I'll skip the rest of her letter, but I will say, bittersweet is a good word for my thoughts about my son's last days. Andrew died peacefully because of the option of medical aid in dying in California, where he lived. I'm comforted by that. I also wish he could have had that option here in Illinois. Andrew Flack accessed medical aid in dying in California, unable to move back home to Illinois to bring his suffering to an end. Before his death, I was able to meet him. He changed my life. I hope he's changed yours as well. And please vote yes in his honor.
On this question, Representative Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise again to voice my opposition, my firm opposition to assisted suicide. I don't have a story, though I am very unhappy that we have not been able to ask the sponsor questions because you just haven't given us enough time. As I've said before, I am pro-life. That includes the unborn, the elderly, the disabled, and those who are alone and struggling. Life is precious, and we should never treat it as disposable. This policy opens the door for abuse, and the victims will be our most vulnerables. Our friends at Misericordia have told me their concerns with this bill. Individuals with developmental disabilities, like always, will be the ones who get pushed aside. I'm an advocate for life, on the way in the world, while you're here, and on the way out. I'm really wondering why some members of this body are so obsessed with ending life, including an unborn. Suicide is serious. We shouldn't be glamorizing this. Vote no.
Leader McCombie.
Thank you, Speaker. To the bill.
The bill.
As we can tell, this is a very emotional bill. I agree with Representative Howder on us looking at sanitary food preparation. Certainly isn't this bill. I think we all have experiences of people in our lives that have cancer, terminal illnesses, or we know somebody. And my mom, who's no longer with us, had terminal throat cancer. And near the end of her life, she had about 6 months left to live. She moved into our home where we were able to take care of her with the help of hospice. My mom would have taken a drug like this, not because of the pain she felt in her bones, her muscles, or the lack of control that she had. She would have killed herself for me, for my pain, to protect me. That's what this bill is going to do, and that is not the right reason to do it. Those last 6 months of my mom's life, and I know obviously nobody knew her here, but you know me, so you can probably assume she was pretty tough, pretty verbal, much harder on me than she was my brothers. But she didn't want me to take care of her. I think she had a lot of regrets about how she raised us kids, and certainly how she raised her daughter. But those final 6 months with my mom, I wouldn't have had if this was the law. During those 6 months, we laid in her bed, we had conversations when I was feeding her through her feeding tube that we never would have had if this would have been the law. Because she wouldn't have done it for her pain, she would have done it for mine. I know this is a very emotional issue, but this is not the bill. This is not the way that this needs to go. I implore you, I beg you, vote no.
Representative DeLuca.
Questions of the sponsor, Mr. Speaker?
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. Leader Gable, can a terminally ill person with a developmental disability qualify for medical aid in dying?
If the terminally ill person does not have the mental capacity to make and communicate an informed decision, they will not qualify for aid in dying. Terminally ill person must be 18 or older and capable of making medical decisions for themselves.
Thank you. And can you clarify once again the process with the doctor's approval?
So the patient has to see a doctor and ask for the medicine, and then they have to wait 5 days and ask the doctor again, and then they have to see a consulting physician and have that visit as well.
And when is this effective if it becomes law?
I believe 9 months.
Will you commit to a trailer bill if we identify any areas that could be tightened up?
Absolutely.
That you will do that?
Absolutely. This is not, this bill and this work has been done for 28 years now in 11 states. So we're not the first state doing it, but absolutely, if we find things that we need to tighten up, I would
Thank you,
definitely.
Mr. Speaker, to the bill.
To the bill.
I've spent a lot of time speaking with my constituents, trying to represent them on this issue as best as possible. And what I've realized is this is really an issue of faith and science colliding. We've discussed God's will, and we've also discussed modern technologies and modern medications keeping people alive maybe beyond what God's intentions were. What I do know, and I would ask that this not be called assisted suicide, I am what's referred to as a survivor of suicide. My family has gone through the unbelievable tragedy when my sister unexpectedly, at 31 years of age, smart, successful, outgoing, beautiful girl, unexpectedly took her life. This bill is not suicide. Thank you.
Representative Nieberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
I rise to voice my strong opposition to physician-assisted suicide, a practice that goes against everything we should stand for as a state and as a society that values human life. Physician-assisted suicide is not about dignity, it's about despair. It tells the sick, the elderly, the disabled, and the vulnerable that their lives are no longer worth living. That when they face this despair, the best we can offer is a prescription for death. That is not compassion. That is abandonment. Doctors are called to heal, to comfort, and to preserve life. And let's be clear, this kind of law opens the door to real abuse. We've seen where this becomes practice, that patients are denied life-saving treatment and offered lethal drugs instead. That is not medical aid. That's a cost-cutting measure disguised as mercy. Every life has value from conception until natural death. We must protect the vulnerable, support the suffering, and uphold the dignity of every human life. This does not respect the gospel. This does not respect the teachings of Jesus Christ or uphold the values of God. And I don't mean that as a judgment on anybody's faith in this room. That's not my place to do that. But the gospel, the teachings of Jesus Christ is very clear on this issue, that we have to value all life. Value all life. I ask everybody to vote no on this measure. And Mr. Speaker, if this should get the requisite amount of votes, I ask for verification.
On this question, Representative Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
First of all, I want to thank the bill sponsor for all the work that she's done on a difficult issue. This isn't something that just came out of nowhere. This is something that we've talked to our constituents and folks around the state since last year, the year before that. We've all gotten emails, and folks acting like this is something new is disingenuous. I also want to thank the advocates that have worked so tirelessly on this issue. Not everybody knows my background. Not everybody knows where I came from. But when I was 17 years old, my mom had brain surgery, and they screwed up. She had a stroke on the table. They let her bleed out. Later to find out from another neurosurgeon, after denying a mistake, that they did make this mistake and hid it. I made a lot of sacrifice for my family. I dropped out of high school to raise my niece and keep my family together. I went back, had difficult relationships with my father. Turns out we were the same person. I moved out, started getting my life together, and found out on my birthday that he was going to die. So, quit my job. This was before, when I was taking care of him, when we just thought he had some issues and not cancer. I worked 2 jobs to take care of the family. And once I found out, I wanted to spend every moment with him. So I quit my job and I did in-home hospice care with him. I got to a point where I watched him, where cancer spread to his bones, and it was painful for me to hold his hand. He died without my mom, who was in a nursing home, and he couldn't go to see her until I brought her to him. It's not something that people should have to go through. And people should be able to make their own decisions. Do I think my father would have made that decision? No. But that's part of this bill. You don't have to make the decision to do this. And I think people, when they're talking about this, just like one of the previous speakers spoke about, should have compassion and empathy for the families by calling this bill what it is: medical aid in dying and not assisted suicide. Because if you sign a DNR, do you consider that assisted suicide? Do you consider that person a murderer when they carry out DNR? Because that's me. Because after my dad died, when I was 20, I took care of my mother. By 21, I was her legal guardian. And at 23, I had to hold my family together and carry out my mom's DNR after she became hospitalized, after her body started breaking down and they had to induce her into a coma and her lungs shut down. Think about what you're saying. Think about the positions that you're putting people in. It's about compassion, empathy. I encourage a yes on this. And I appreciate the work and the compassion and the empathy and the time that you took to get here, and the conversations that we've had. I've had conversations in my district with
Representative.
I'll make it quick. With somebody who had a terminal illness with a degenerative disease that was getting ready to lose use of her diaphragm. I've been in a nursing home for 6 years with my mother and watched people who were terminal with no family, with nobody to love them, with no care. I encourage a yes vote, and I encourage compassion and empathy.
Representative Johnson.
To the bill, Mr. Speaker.
To the bill.
We've been talking about this bill the last couple years, and I've really had to continue to consider my thoughts on this bill. And like a lot of people, I always go back to my lessons from my father. My dad was the toughest man I've ever known, tougher than anybody in this room, I can tell you that. And we used to have conversations about this, and my father was a strong advocate for people having the ability to not suffer, to make their own decision. I did not know that in the spring of 2001, years later, that my father would be diagnosed with lung cancer and be given 4 months to live. This tough man, ended up going through rounds of chemo, rounds of radiation, ended up having surgery in December, and was actually declared cancer-free. Walking miracle. Those next several months were one of the best months of my life, as that my lessons continued with my father. But as often the case with cancer, you're never cancer-free. On September 18th, 2001, my father had a PET scan, and the cancer was everywhere. The next 6 weeks were excruciating. He had a tumor growing into his chest, covering his windpipe over his throat. Every single day, he got less and less oxygen. My sister and I took turns along with my stepmother. We would always, those last 6 weeks, we would sit with him, hold his hand, tell him we loved him. As fate would have it, though, on November 2nd, we were both busy. Stepmom went upstairs, and he passed away that night on November 2nd. He died alone. Wasn't anybody there to hold his hand, tell him they loved him. Had his thumb on this orange button that would provide him oxygen. There was nowhere for the oxygen to go anymore. I just want to close. I've heard God's will invoked here a couple times, and this debate started even last week with that term. I'm not going to question anyone's faith. I will tell you that my God is not one that believes that someone should suffer all the way to the end of their life. I just don't believe that. He's a compassionate God. But I also want to say that once again, we find ourselves in a situation where just a few on the other side seem to think that if you are in opposition to this bill, that you're pro-life. And then I will simply say to that in a couple cases, once again, as I did in the case of my mother, I really just see you as anti-choice. So I want to thank the sponsor as well. I want to thank the advocates for the work in this bill. And I strongly encourage an aye vote. Thank you.
Leader Gable will close.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. So I've been working on this issue for quite a long time. And in the last 6 years, constituents throughout the state have reached out to their legislators on both sides of the aisle in support of this issue, and it's resulted in thousands of calls, visits, emails, and letters. Let's be clear, medical aid in dying is already the law in 11 states and the District of Columbia, jurisdictions that cover millions of other Americans. In those places, when the legislation was considered, they heard the very same fears. And guess what? None came to pass. Rather than seeing a score of people coerced into taking an action against their will, what we have actually seen is a small group of terminally ill people, people suffering unbearable pain, to be able to end that suffering and die in peace, using a process that they initiate and that they have control over. That is what this bill is about. Not about the fears and the hypotheticals, but about helping those who are facing a terminal diagnosis. It is for those that I'm presenting this bill. It is for those who have worked so hard trying to get this bill passed here, who have advocated for this. And you know what? They all wanted to live, but they weren't going to. They knew they were going to die. They knew 88% of them were in hospice and palliative care, and they only wished that they could take medication when the pain was beyond too much. So for all those people who have worked so hard, please vote yes on this bill.
Members, Representative Niemer has asked for a verification. All members, please be in your chairs and vote your own switches. The question is, shall Senate Bill 1950 pass? All those in favor vote aye. Opposed, vote nay. The voting is open. Have all voted a wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Mr. Clerk, please take the record. On this question, there are 63 voting yes, 42 voting no, 2 voting present. Mr. Clerk, please read the names of those voting in the affirmative.
A poll of those voting in the affirmative. Representative Andrade, Representative Avalar, Representative Benton, Representative Blair Sherlock, Representative Briel, Representative Buckner, Representative Canty, Representative Cassidy, Representative Chung, Representative Costa Howard, Representative Crawford, Representative Croak, Representative Lisa Davis, Representative Will Davis, Representative Delgado, Representative DeLuca, Representative Deuter, Representative Dittich, Representative Dubuclet, Representative Favor Dias, Representative Ford, Representative Gable, Representative Gong Gershwitz, Representative Gonzalez, Representative Gordon Booth, Representative Grassi, Representative Guerrero Cuellar, Representative Gazzardi, Representative Hansen, Representative Harper, Representative Barbara Hernandez, Representative Norma Hernandez, Representative Hirschauer, Representative Nguyen, Representative Jimenez, Representative Johnson, Representative Jones, Representative Katz Moll, Representative LaPointe, Representative Lilly, Representative Mauve, Representative Manley, Representative Mason, Representative Myers Martin, Representative Moeller, Representative Morgan, Representative Moylan, Representative Mussman, Representative Ness, Representative Olacol, Representative Ortiz, Representative Rita,
Mr. Clerk. Representative Nieberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I withdraw the verification.
The representative withdrawn his verification request. On this question, there are 63 voting yes, 42 voting no, 2 voting present, and this bill having received a constitutional majority is hereby declared passed.